We haven't talked about Harada's YouTube channel, Harada's Bar, in quite some time. But today we're going to be talking about the latest video that's uploaded. On the topic of the character, Azucena, Harada says, "For Azucena, I didn't give detailed instructions regarding the battle mechanics and gimmick." But Harada says, when he saw her having the auto high evasion and the auto low evasion, he asked himself a question. Would this be okay? This is definitely something we're going to see progress. I compare it to Leroy Smith's parry, what a lot of people do. We see now that it's not so simple, not so spammable. You really don't have like true control over it the way you do with Leroy Smith. How players can manipulate situations so her parry can be used to the best is really going to determine how deadly this character is. I'm a Yoshi main, and Yoshi is very situational, and how good you are at understanding that and working in those situations will determine how good the character is. And for Azucena and her auto parries, it's going to be the same type of mentality that you have to apply. But switching topics, talking about the next section here. He says, in Tekken Project, there's a team responsible for creating backgrounds and battlefields. Battlefields is something that I want to highlight because we haven't seen that just yet. If you know about the leak, then you have an idea of what this is referring to. But backgrounds itself is just talking about the stages in the game. Just from a visual standpoint and also like audio, I think Tekken 8 is super special. I know a lot of people say that the hit effects in Tekken 8 kind of sounds lame, and at times I do think it's kind of underwhelming, but when you just think about how the music is so much more vibrant in Tekken 8 and also the stage makes more noise, it makes sense why they adjusted the audio the way they did. When you're just gaming and you're just in the thick of it, all three of those elements blend together and really makes the whole experience different. Tekken 7 in comparison to Tekken 8 is really very quiet. And also I would even say Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat. Those games, their stages isn't as vibrant as Tekken 8. Going back to Azucena and her stage, Harada says somehow they included aliens and UFOs into the background. The interviewer says, "Is there any UFOs or aliens in other backgrounds?" Harada says yes. If you're really into Tekken, you probably know that. In Tekken 5, there's aliens in the background. I tell them not to put it in the backgrounds, but they're still there. I think it would be really cool if they eventually tied all these things together, tied into something. You know, you have Paul Phoenix and his struggle with aliens. The character Ogre is theorized to be an alien of some sort. I think it would be interesting somewhere down the road if this played a bigger role in the story. You don't have to dedicate a whole game to it, but maybe we get a character who's an alien or something like that. Putting my crazy ideas aside, let's talk about the developers' crazy ideas. Roughly 4 minutes into the video, Harada takes the craziest turn that no one was ever predicting. He says, "I don't mean this in a sexual way. It's natural for humans. When people move, their chests naturally bounce. I strongly insisted not to incorporate any bouncy movements for characters in Tekken, but I said we're going to be more serious and stiff approach. I meant it more in a sense of being serious, not literally stiff." Just before finishing the final version, character's chest suddenly starts to bounce. He looks around and says, "Who did it?" The programmers and modelers are probably secretly working on it together. With each title, bouncing became more natural. When Tekken 8 was first being marketed, I compared this aspect directly to Street Fighter 6 because you can see how their game operates. And Tekken 8, for the most part, doesn't really do that. Yes, you have customizations and things like that, Reina, stuff like that. But for the most part, you really don't have that element being like forced to the forefront of the game. I think Tekken does a good job of blending both. Mortal Kombat, you don't really get enough. Street Fighter, you can argue maybe too much. Tekken 8 is kind of somewhere in the middle. The topic goes back to aliens. He says, "I like to know if people in Peru are aware of the discussions about their country being associated with UFOs and supernatural phenomenons. I'm curious if they are familiar with the various claims, such as the ideas of extraterrestrial beings visited in the past." I have a video actually from 5 months ago that dives deep into the lore of this. It really speaks to how, one, Tekken incorporated this into their game, but two, like the origins of it. How did these theories and ideas come about? Because this stage that's in Tekken 8, it is considered one of the most sketchy places on the planet as it relates to aliens. And the fact that they incorporated it into Tekken so excellently, That's something that I highlighted. Go watch that video if you missed it. Here's when he starts comparing Azucena to Reina. Players who can make bold moves might be strong with Azucena. I think Azucena is well suited for players who can attack aggressively. When defending, can boldly and confidently guard against opponents. Reina, as you can see in the video, uses techniques from a certain fighting style. To people who like that kind of thing, especially those in Peru, might find her suitable. Many players in Peru use Mishimas. She has her own original moves, which is really cool. Reina's fighting style really is interesting from a lore standpoint. Her fighting style in the lore is said to be like a traditional kind of older Mishima style. They keep showing us these things of the past. I wonder how deep will they go into that? Will there be a point in the Tekken 8 story where we flash back to the age of the samurai and we're following some random Mishima who did something crazy and set everyone on this trajectory? I don't know, but when you talk about constantly how in the past they did exorcism, they did this, they did that, it only makes you wonder what they're actually going to do with all of this old information that's being brought to the forefront. You also got to wonder who taught her this fighting style. We're all under the impression that Heihachi trained her, but does that mean that Heihachi knows this and he just never uses these techniques? Or does it mean that he went somewhere else and had someone else teach her as well? He says, when a preset costumes is completely different from the original costume, I was like, who is this character? If you can't distinguish characters based on the stance, you might not be able to recognize who the character is for a moment. This is something that happens even in Tekken 7 with the limited customization. Sometimes you'll be fighting the character, let's say people will customize Brian Ferry and you'll think it's Steve Fox or Zhao Yu, Josie or something like that. I wonder how increased that will be with the customizations, especially the outfit swapping in Tekken 8. Colors and such are the character's identity, right? For instance, with the old Paul, he has the red outfit, right? Although we changed Paul this time, some characters haven't fully established their iconic look yet. That final sentence is really interesting because whenever I see a fake leak, some AI art, this is what I think about. Does this outfit that's being portrayed to us represent the character's look? And a lot of times the answer is no. Once you establish a character's look, you won't really break that for any reason. And Yoshimitsu is one of the few characters where they do. So I'm skipping a little bit ahead because I don't want this video to be too long, but he's talking about statistics, win rates, and how do you determine when a character is too strong and when you should nerf or buff the character. Actually proving whether Azucena is strong or not requires looking at the statistics after thousands of matches. I have the statistics for Tekken 7. As I always say, Akuma has such a low winning rate, he can never reach 50%. It was always around 40% losses, 60% wins, or less because it's so hard to master Akuma. Akuma has been nerfed for so long, but then only when players play Akuma really well in tournaments, he gets attention. People start saying Akuma's OP. Usually people use Akuma and they end up losing. But when a skilled player plays Akuma really well, it can create the impression it's overwhelmingly strong. And this is something that I try to highlight as well. Like, it's different from tournaments and online. And I think content creators, pro players, tournament organizers, I think a lot of people don't emphasize this enough. Some characters are tournament viable and some characters are not. Some characters are online gods, but they are absolutely trash in tournaments. And maybe the statistics being public would help us see this and help us shape our ideas around the game much better. I don't know. I just think they have the data, they should release it because people are obviously pushing it back against them and going off of what they see and less about what they're experiencing because they can't see the data like he says. He says, nowadays statistics don't matter. How characters are evaluated by players are often dominated by their impressions. So I didn't want Azucena to receive such evaluations being too OP from the debut. We didn't really know if Azucena was too strong yet, but I said the nerfs just as a countermeasure to ease the impression of people that might say Azucena is too strong. Realistically speaking, not just Azucena, but all characters being continuously adjusted until release. Then we will decide the good balance. This is actually interesting because it shows that they're learning from Tekken 7. Tekken 7, there's a lot of characters who are super OP for no reason. Whether it be the character being carried by one single attack, or it being a character having just the best, like, well-rounded moveset, and all of those things combined carrying the character. For Tekken 8, they're trying to make the characters not really weak, but you don't want to push them and make them OP and everyone hates them. That's the thing, like a character like Marduk comes to mind. People always ask me how do I feel about Marduk, and I say that I hate him because he's powerful, but I realize that I don't dislike Marduk. I dislike the way the character is balanced, and you could put that balance on any character and I would dislike it. So I think that's what the developers are realizing is, yes, you want people to play this new character and whatever, but forcing the balance to be OP is kind of going to have the reverse effect and people hate them. I think Leroy is the biggest example of that. He says every character will be adjusted, but I said Azucena will be nerfed just to balance things out. What I meant by saying nerfed at the moment is that exactly the problem we're talking about. People evaluate the characters by impression, although such might not be true. But that's it. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and bye-bye.